Мною принято решение о проведении специальной военной операции.
The Russian military has begun a brutal assault on the people of Ukraine.
Я кажу усім партнерам нашої держави зараз можливо.
Russia's invasion of Ukraine is a world historical event and the effects of it will likely ripple out for years to come. In this video, we will talk about the biggest loser in the current war. Since 1945, the world has done a remarkably good job of preventing wars between great powers and making the costs of unprovoked aggression extremely high. In a matter of days, Russia has upended this system by launching a devastating attack on Ukraine, a European democracy of 44 million people. The whole world will suffer from this war, but some countries will lose a lot. In fact, there's one country that may turn out as the biggest loser in this war. The United States of America. Yes, you heard it right. The world superpower. Uncle Sam will be the biggest loser, and in this video we will see how and what the US will lose in this war. In a TV address on the 24th of February, President Vladimir Putin declared a war on Ukraine as Russia could not feel safe, develop and exist, because of what he claimed was a constant threat from modern Ukraine. Immediately, airports and military headquarters were attacked. Then tanks and troops rolled in from Russia. Russian-annexed Crimea and its ally Belarus. Big cities have been shelled, neighborhoods razed to the ground and millions of Ukrainians have fled their homes. Ukraine has made it clear it wanted to join the European Union and the Western Defensive Alliance, NATO, but the Kremlin will not have it. Well, from the last 2 weeks, everybody has heard about NATO more than anything else. So, let me give you a quick introduction about NATO. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization was created in 1949 by the United States, Canada, and several Western European nations to provide collective security against the Soviet Union. Also, the Russian leader signed a decree recognizing the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic and the Luhansk People's Republic as independent. It laid out plans for aid agreements between Russia and the two separatist territories. The fact that Russia decided to attack Ukraine ignoring all the warnings from the US shows how the power of the US is slowly diminishing globally. And this may also lead both the US and Russia to a longer, more intense confrontation, with both sides aggressively probing each other for weakness. The goal of US policy might shift from finding what Biden calls a stable and predictable relationship with Russia to sapping Moscow's strength through a concerted campaign of geopolitical attrition. But this raises a second question about what might happen next, involving America's larger global posture. Biden's foreign policy and defense strategy have so far aimed to achieve quiet on non-Asian fronts so that Washington can focus on China. That approach wouldn't survive a major land war in Europe. The hard sanctions on Russia and massive arms aid to Ukraine by the US and Western European countries will help deepen the relations of Russia and China, which can become a headache for the US. And if Putin wins the war, there's a huge probability that other European nations will hesitate to trust American security assurance. It's true that Russia will suffer immediate damage due to the harsh sanctions imposed by America and its allies, but the damage America will suffer in the long run will be much bigger as Russia, which is a big market, will stop relying on Western products and services. In fact, Russia will develop stronger trade relations with China and India. Russia can also go on the Chinese path and ban all the American social media companies in the country forever and develop its own social media ecosystem. In the latest move to punish Russia over its invasion of Ukraine, the US government announced a ban on Russian oil, part of a broader prohibition that includes natural gas and coal.
Today, I'm announcing the United States is targeting the main artery of Russia's economy. We're banning all imports of Russian oil and gas and energy. That means Russian oil will no longer be acceptable at US ports.
Russia is the world's top exporter of crude and oil products combined, producing about 10 million barrels per day, or 8% of global supply. In 2021, the US imported an average of 209,000 barrels per day of crude oil and 500,000 barrels per day of other petroleum products from Russia. That represented 3% of US crude oil imports and 1% of the total crude oil processed by US refineries. For Russia, this represented 3% of its total exports. But what the ban on Russian oil did is, it fired the prices up of petrol in the US and in Europe. The US can afford the ban on Russian oil, but not its European allies. And as far as Russia is concerned, it will try to sell its oil at a cheaper price to other countries until things settle down. Russia's resources are not just oil and gas. Russia also has major deposits of metals and minerals, timber supplies, and vast amounts of land. While much of that land is under permafrost, Russia ranks number 3 in arable land supplies and is rising as world rankings for agricultural producers. The bans and sanctions will definitely hurt Russia for a very long time, but Russia will find alternatives, and those alternatives are gonna haunt the US in the future. One of the alternatives will definitely be China, as it clearly refused to call Russia's attack on Ukraine an invasion. If Russia wins the war, these growing relations between Russia and China will completely dismantle America's foreign policy, as it will now have two big military powers standing against it. Another major issue the US may have to face is cyber attacks. The Russian government has been previously accused of interfering in the 2016 US presidential election with the goals of harming the campaign of Hillary Clinton, boosting the candidacy of Donald Trump, and increasing political and social discord in the United States. According to the US intelligence community, the operation, named Project Lakta, was ordered directly by Russian President Vladimir Putin. The Special Counsel's report, made public in April 2019, examined numerous contacts between the Trump campaign and Russian officials, but concluded that there was insufficient evidence to bring any conspiracy or coordination charges against Trump or his associates. There are high chances that due to the souring relations between Russia and the US, we may see more cyber attacks in future. There are many things that went wrong on the US's end. From the very beginning, even after being completely aware about Russia's intentions to invade Ukraine, the US didn't do anything solid to prevent the war. The US and other Western nations should have firmly mediated to resolve the issue, but instead, they were more inclined towards providing lethal arms worth millions to Ukraine, which will not only extend the war but also decrease the chances of peace in the region for years to come. Ukraine needs more arms to save itself from the Russian invasion. The supply of weapons to Ukraine is coming from other channels as well, but according to the military aid policy, the US has to be the principal export source within the North Atlantic Treaty Organization bloc. An Oxford University researcher in 2019 said, "Selling lethal weapons to Ukraine is the equivalent of pouring kerosene into a flame." Yet, the supply of weapons not only continued but did so at an increased pace. Because war is good business for the defense contractors and manufacturers, and the US is the world's largest defense contractor and arms exporter. It suits the arms manufacturing companies of the US that Ukraine is provided with lethal military aid, apparently to keep Russia off its border. But almost every geostrategic thinker warned that continued arming of Ukraine would invite a war from Russia. Arms manufacturers and defense contractors benefit bringing revenue to the American government, but the cost would be paid by Ukrainian people. The current situation brought America's helplessness and true intentions to the fore. And by imposing hard sanctions on Russia and supplying millions of dollars of arms to Ukraine, the US has made another superpower its enemy. Putin will deepen friendship with China to stand against the US. Not just Russia. Many other countries in the world will learn the lesson and will reduce their reliance on the US. Rather than relying on the US dollar, they will explore other options for trade. These are not just speculations. China is attempting to buy oil in yuan rather than dollars, and it may have found a willing seller. Saudi Arabia, which sells a quarter of its exports to China, is considering making these sales in yuan. The US's geopolitical hegemony is based so significantly on the petrodollar, with 80% of global oil transactions denominated in dollars, that the question is ever present. What would the world look like if the petro-yuan became the oil industry's currency of choice? America can make billions through the current war by selling arms, but every single dollar earned by this war can make America the biggest loser in the future. By reviewing the current situations, it seems like we can see a drastic change in the world order very soon. We may also see another big invasion by China in Taiwan in the coming days, as China will definitely try to take full advantage of this situation. Well, that's a discussion we'll leave for another video. What do you think of the US's role in the Russia-Ukraine war? Which country do you think can become the next number one? Tell us in the comments down below.